This is Chair, place where we discuss innovations. Today I have great pleasure to talk with Zoja Kukic on challenging subject of the ethics of innovation. So Zoja is entrepreneur, activist, researcher working with startup and enterprises with focus on digital transformation and evolutionary growth. She actively worked in tech and startup ecosystem for almost a decade, right? Co-founded, started European regional network organization helping high-tech startups companies to grow. And besides co-founding Started, she's today vice president of digital transformation in Signet. So Zoja, welcome to Chair.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here.
So who gets the control on innovation? Innovation is the central question of our time. Should society-led technological prowess of scientific brilliance determine who makes decisions that may affect all humanity in profound ways? So many questions arise today that we cannot get simple or straight answer. So I want to go back to the basics. At the first glance, innovation appears to be ethically indifferent, and its moral evaluation seems solely related to its use. Can you say to me why this is not true?
Well, first of all, I don't think that anything is ethically indifferent. So in that sense, neither is innovation. And we can look at it when we talk about ethical innovations, there are several segments, but how we can look at it and is how many different ways we can use this new innovative technology or solution or whatever we are talking about, how we can use it in a non-ethical way. So for example, first of all, let's say we have one first tier that would be innovations which are created with ethics in mind, trying to solve some current ethical inequalities or ethical problems, or trying to do something good for the world. So that's so they have that perspective. That's how they were founded. And then you have a way larger number of innovations which were created to solve some specific problem or to provide an alternative solution for something without strictly focusing on ethics. And that's where we have different layers on where the things can go. So for example, if we talk about CRISPR, the genome editing technology, it can be used for so much good, but it can also be used for a lot of bad things. And
cure hereditary diseases on one side and on the other manufacture synthetic genomes,
and
right?
then also create, for example, deeper societal inequalities. If it becomes too expensive, then the rich people get healthier, get edited to be healthier, and the poor don't. So there is a lot of questions which we still, for example, need to answer. And okay, CRISPR, maybe that's something very visible to everyone, that it creates a lot of ethical questions. But when we look deeper, almost every innovation in the end does. So let's talk about social media. When they started, we didn't think about their role, which they have today, which is freedom of speech, data privacy, and so many other layers, which are the questions, ethical questions, which people who are working in these companies and the society and the regulators need to be answering all the time.
As you said already, the innovation can contribute to creation of or destruction of jobs and fight against crime or invasion of privacy. Because of all of that mentioned, responsible innovation is crucial, but it's not easy. How to make it less hard?
Well, first of all, there are different techniques in which people can always think about ethics in the things that they are doing. But there is one, I would say, there is no one solution for everyone that fixes every company, every organization. But there is one thing that is very important and proved to be successful in thinking ethically and building ethical businesses and organizations, and that's thinking about it from the start. It doesn't mean that when you are starting your business that you are now looking at all the implications, ethical implications it can create. So we are not talking about that Mark Zuckerberg should have come up to this situation when he started Facebook and then start solving the problem which he doesn't even have. But embedding the core values in the organization, that what is ethical for the organization and that it's ethically driven. So for example, I always like to say maybe one of the most famous examples is Google, and they for quite a long time one of their corporate mottos was don't be evil. And when you talk about that and when you think in that way, then whenever that question comes up, you then think from the perspective which is not only profit driven, but also you include some other segments in what you are doing.
I want to talk about a bit about regulation. So since innovation outstrips government ability to regulate preventively, establishment of ethical priorities rest on innovators, right? You have worked on with many founders that are innovators in your years in Started. And what is your impression how they cope with the ethics of innovation?
Well, I feel like always my answer is it varies, but it really does. And
this is a challenging subject today.
Exactly, so, yeah. It's a challenging subject, and I feel like even in today's world, there is not even a single topic which has one straightforward answer. But this definitely doesn't. So if we talk about the innovators who are really thinking about solving ethical problems and are building products, for example, solving the plastics issue that the whole world has, and are trying to create different solutions for that, they are already more entrenched and think more about ethical perspectives of what they are building than maybe somebody who is just building a platform for some niche in business. And it's not something that comes across as a priority. And to be honest, as someone, as you said, who has worked with entrepreneurs, I don't think it's even the right way, because as we mentioned Mark Zuckerberg previously, if he started thinking about all those implications, he would have never built what he did. So in entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you know that yourself as well, you need to focus sometimes and you need to solve the hardest problems first, and the hardest problem is basically getting your product to the market, solving this product market fit. But then it's really important, and once you do that, once you get customers, once you get the traction, that at that point you don't get evil and think of what are some other implications, how you can tweak the system in order to do more good than bad.
Is there any framework to establish ethical guidelines in startups?
I wouldn't connect it only with startups because there are different ways how companies and organizations can basically structure their ethical behavior. And on one hand, there is a framework which is used in many different NGOs. NGO sector is basically leading in that segment, and every business can actually borrow it. And there are different sources. We can even link some of them in the end in the links of the show notes if you want. But basically, they come down to asking yourself different questions related to the business that you're doing and the product you're building, and trying to basically through those questions answer where your product is. But then in the end, there is also something which is in the theory of ethics. There are 3 different ways how you can assess your organization or even yourself personally or the actions you do. And one of them is framework based on consequences. So basically we try to imagine the future and see our different actions and see what are the consequences of those actions, and then try to choose a path which is most ethical from the alternatives that we saw in this imagining of the future. The second one is based on duties, so we can choose and see what we should be doing and what we should not be doing based on what is our role, what are we doing, where are we good at, what we understand and what we don't. And the third one, I think it's most relatable to to most of us because it's basically something that we can do for ourselves as well, and it's based on virtues. And it means that we define, as a person, for example, we define a set of virtues which we think, okay, this makes a good person. This is a virtuous person. Or as a company, this is a company with good values, a virtuous company or organization. And then we try, whenever we have a decision to make, we stop and we say, okay, what would a virtuous person or a company with good values do? And then try to systemize our ethical behavior around that. And it's not that simple. It sounds simple. The thing
sounds very interesting, actually.
But the thing with ethics is that we often have a lot of questions and need to dig deeper to understand them, because sometimes we are trying to do good for some group of people and then end up doing bad for some other. And when we are on the topic of innovation, if you allow me, there is one interesting example I often use, but there was a research that compared innovation created in the cities and basically ranking of cities based on innovation and inequalities in those cities. What it showed is the more innovative the city and their people are, the more unequal they are. And then when you dig deeper, why is that? Like, so if you're a mayor of some city or city administration, you think, oh, it's good to be Boston and to have MIT and Harvard and all those people innovating and great companies. But then what happens is that that better innovations are built when people are near each other. So when innovators can share it better. And then what happens once with that is that they are clustering in some smaller groups while the others are moving away. They earn more money, so it's clustering of rich people. The poor have to move. They are not anymore close to good education. They are not anymore that close to new ideas. So basically what happens is you divide the city.
Yeah, mega classes, right?
Even further. So those are the things that at some point you understand and then look at the whole thing quite differently, and that's why it's not that easy. It sounds super easy at first.
And which cities this research was done? So.
Well, I think it was only in US cities,
okay.
So it might be different for Europe. It's different. Europe is, at least European cities are not that flexible as the US.
It's a different ecosystem and everything, yeah.
But it would be interesting to see what's happening in Europe and maybe in some other countries as well.
We talked earlier about Facebook and Zuckerberg and everything, and I would like to go back a couple of years and ask a question about whole situation about Cambridge Analytica, and because this is example of total collision of innovation and ethics, right? So can you comment me on that?
I think it's such a complicated issue because, first of all, how I see it is when it started, people didn't even understand the power of data. And when I say people, not even Facebook, I think, realized the importance of what happened and what they let happen with their the data they were managing. Basically, I wouldn't say that their data. Then how Cambridge Analytica was involved in so many political operations around the globe. So not like the biggest notice was the US, but it was also Brexit campaign was Cambridge Analytica was instrumental in that, and campaigns around the world, political campaigns. And the way they were, I think the way they were operating with our data was really scary. And I think it made us, the whole world, realize what can happen if we don't pay attention. And in some sense, I don't want to say, oh, it's good that it happened, but if it already happened, at least why I'm glad is that we became smarter in how we think about our data, about data privacy and everything that it involves. And right now, what's happening with Google, Facebook, and other big tech companies is a big bad reputation caused to data management that they're doing. And I think that's something that the world realized thanks to Cambridge Analytica. So I always like to look at the things
from a positive perspective.
From a positive perspective, and where can we go from here? So in that sense, I think it happened sooner rather than later, because it could have gone on for much longer than it actually did.
I want to jump back again on the previous question, and you mentioned that innovation don't address all parts of society equally. Can you elaborate on this a bit more, because it's something that is very interesting.
So what I was trying to say is, for example, you have different products that are benefiting more some segment of society than the other. And for example, I will start way back. For example, washing machine. It was an innovation that in some way, even you can find great articles how washing machine actually was the beginning of feminism movements, and because it released so much more time for women, and women were able, instead of washing laundry by hand, they were able to do something more with their time. So for example, that's one innovation that was directly focused on one group more than the other. Then also, and then you can find different examples of other types of innovation which are focused around, let's stay in this gender area because I love it. And this is why we also talk about, when we talk about innovation, we often talk about technology innovation. That's something that drives us. And then when we talk about tech innovations, then when we talk about technology in general, we always say that we need more gender equality in technology, and we need more women representatives because they are also behind that technology and behind the innovations that are being created. And for example, when Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, released their health app, I don't know if you know about it, but for a few months, basically the first version, which was measuring your heartbeat, steps you take, which you can enter a bunch of different details about your health, you weren't able to enter the details about your menstrual cycles, which is one of the most important health aspects of 1/2 of the population. So those are the things that we often see and are extremely relevant for building a better world, because of course Apple fixed it, but there are different products which are not fixing it or are not suitable for all of us. And even when we talk about different segments of population, rich and poor, there is a lot of things that are benefiting the rich and are not benefiting the poorer segment, and are maybe creating even a stronger divide. One of the things people often use with this is the peer-to-peer economy, or this whole gig economy, because what's happening, richer people can ride, for example, for less, and poorer people have even less social security, health insurance, and things like that. And those are the things that regulators and society need to pay more attention to in order not to create further divides, basically.
You often talk about connection between collaboration and innovation, and apart from obvious that different information and experiences boost creativity and imagination, what else is important to know here?
Yes, it's really good apart from obvious, and it's also interesting how we discussed this collaborative approach in innovation when we talked about the cities. But when we look and think about ethics in innovation, collaboration is important because it helps everybody win. It helps us build this win-win mindset, instead of thinking of win-lose. So basically, when we are building something, a product, it's always good to have somebody with whom we are working on it, and then our partner, a company we are collaborating with, even our client, if we are looking at it in the sense of collaboration, we all grow at the same time. Instead of, for example, if we look at people as competition, and then what happens is that we are focusing on us winning and somebody else losing. And we at Signet, we really often talk about that the collaboration is the key, because this way you can really grow fast. The key to many successful entrepreneurship endeavors, basically. It helps you grow fast, it helps you overcome some obstacles and some things that you don't know enough. You find somebody who can help you in solving those issues, and then again, you are not alone in succeeding, because at the top it can be very lonely and it's not an ideal position we should all be. But basically at the top you have you've lifted others while you climbed, and that's something that we find important. That's something that I think a lot of people in their personal lives do. Like you have a company, then you look to get your friends on board, you look for co-founders when starting a business, but then when it comes to collaboration with different business or organizational entities, somehow we forget about all those values, and that's something we find very important.
With all the things that we discussed today, is there a crisis in innovation today?
Well, with all the things we discussed today, what do you think, Nemanja?
I hope there is no crisis, because I'm in the business of innovation, and there are always challenges, but I believe that we are not in crisis right now.
I agree. I think that ethical questions will always be there. Innovations always move faster than ethics, in a sense that what we talked about, that we don't think about it. The fact is that now innovations are moving really fast. But I also think that we as people, as a support system, are also moving and thinking faster, and that it's not going to be a crisis, because we are going to win.
Thank you so much for your time, and that you've been with us today here in Chair. And to you out there, if you like today's episode and you want to hear more about subjects related to innovation, please subscribe, and see you next time.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure.